The most horrifying news story I have ever seen in my entire life just popped up on Live Action, and very few, if any, establishment media sources are talking about it because it's a politically inconvenient crime. I have lived through many wars all around the world have taken place in my lifetime, all sorts of terrible crimes, murders, and serial killings, and all sorts of things. This is by far the most horrifying crime. There have been discovered the frozen remains of 5 aborted babies in Washington, D.C. And the part of the story that gets a little weird is they were found in the apartment of an anti-abortion activist. Now, it's not really weird when you figure out what's going on here. A whistleblower at an abortion clinic tipped off this anti-abortion activist. They have the evidence of these abortions, which are potentially illegal abortions in that the babies may have been born or partially born before they were killed, which would be in violation of federal law. But even if it's not technically in violation of the civil law, it's obviously it's a crime against humanity. It's a crime that cries out to God because these are babies. These are so undeniably babies who are in expressions of extreme pain, who are totally recognizable like any newborn baby, and they were killed through abortion. Frankly, if it's not in violation of federal law, that's an even greater indictment of us. There are photos of this. There's evidence. I have blurred the photos for this show because you'll have nightmares. I would say if you are already pro-life and you already oppose legal abortion, don't look up these pictures. Don't look them up because you'll have nightmares and there's no reason to. You already see the issue for what it is. If you are pro-choice, if you support legal abortion to any degree, look up the pictures. You can find them. There are just Google Live Action Abortion Washington, D.C. You'll see they're kind of blurred out here. Look them up. If you support abortion and you think, well, it's a complicated issue, I don't like abortion personally, but it should be legal. To whatever degree you support abortion, click the photos and tell me you support abortion. I don't think anyone but an absolute stone-cold sociopath can look at these photos and tell me that they still support abortion. It's why it's so important the work that Live Action has done here, so important that the work that this anti-abortion activist has done here, and the response of the government tells you everything you need to know about this evil institution and the extremely corrupt people who are covering up for it. This anti-abortion activist, Lauren Handy, I believe her name is, has been indicted. So she's the anti-abortion activist, the pro-life activist, who was discovered to have these frozen bodies in her home that she was apparently given by a whistleblower. She has been indicted, along with 8 others, on federal felony conspiracy charges. What are the charges? She's accused of blocking access to a DC abortion clinic in October of 2020. This blockade was broadcast on Facebook, and now she's up on federal charges. I'm sure she will now have new charges added to the list because of her storage of these bodies. Do you know who's not going to have any charges brought against them? Do you know who's not going to be held in any way responsible for these crimes that cry out to God? The absolute slaughter of children who have pained expressions on their face, frozen from this moment. Do you know who's not going to have any consequences? The people who did it. That's who. The person who blew the whistle on it, the people who exposed these crimes to the world, they're probably going to send her behind bars for a long time. The people who committed these crimes, outright infanticide, nothing is going to happen to them at all. Take a listen to the Executive Assistant Chief of Police in Washington, D.C.
Ms. Handy has been indicted on a federal investigation led by the FBI that MPD was not a part of. So that's number one. The second piece is that we were led to that house that you mentioned. We did recover items that were, these are preliminary results. OCME took a look at those items. They have been confirmed as fetuses. What we're seeing now is those fetuses were aborted in accordance with DC law. So we are not investigating this incident along those lines. Doesn't speak anything criminal in nature right now about that. except for how they got into this house. And so we'll continue to look at that.
They were aborted. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Let me rewind. These items that were found were fetuses. So the people, the little babies who were killed, they're items. They're just objects. And it turns out the objects are fetuses, which is the Latin word for baby. But we have to use the word fetus so that we can dehumanize the babies. And the babies were killed. They were killed with these pained expressions on their faces in accordance with DC law. So there's no crime there. Nothing's being investigated. The only crime is how they got to the house, according to our authorities. I love America. I believe in America, to quote the first line of The Godfather. Very hard. It's very hard to love America when you hear that kind of stuff. It's very hard. When you think about all the awful regimes in the world, there are lots of terrible regimes. We never stop, or our ruling class never stops talking about all the evil regimes around the world. And then you listen to one of our public authorities say that the 5 babies that we are looking at, we can look them right in their eyes, in their cold eyes. We can look at what happened to them and say there was no crime here. Totally in accordance with the law. The only crime was that this was exposed. If the babies are just items that were discovered in a home, what's the big deal? They're just I have items in my home. You probably have items in your home, don't you? We all have items. Items not a big deal. It's a big deal, and they're investigating the woman who had the bodies in their homes because they're bodies, because they're human beings whose dead bodies were being treated in this unusual way. That's why it's a big deal. But the criminals, the killers who killed the babies, they're not being prosecuted or even investigated because they're not bodies, they're just items. They're trying to have both sides of this. And they're trying to have both sides to attack the good guys, to persecute the good guys who are exposing the crime, and to cover up for the killers. It's very hard. I still love my country, I still love America, but it's really hard to do that when you consider that America kills upwards of 1 million babies a year and speaks of it in such callous terms. And when you see the reality of it, when you can look the babies right in the eye, and these psychos who run our country say, no crime here. They won't perform an autopsy. They can't perform an autopsy because to perform an autopsy would be to admit that these are babies. They're not going to perform an autopsy because, by the way, what the assistant police chief just said here very likely isn't true. The babies may very well have been killed in violation of federal law. Partial birth abortions are a violation of federal law, and there's a lot of evidence that that's how they were killed. But nope, cover up, nothing to see here. Move along, move along, move along. Sick. I'm glad you liked that clip. If you want to get more episodes, more clips, more interviews, subscribe, ring that bell. Also, head on over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, wherever you get your audio podcasts. Subscribe to The Michael Knowles Show. Leave a 5-star review. We'll see you next time.